Rodriguez here with PULP Colorado, and with me we have Kara Mason, who has bylines in Sentinel Colorado, and with us, obviously, PULP Colorado. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to go through the news around the state, but we kind of talk behind the headlines and give some perspective, because I think as you know, Kara, there's not, we get the story, but there's so much that we know and sources give us behind the story and things that we can't quite put in the articles. So first, how you doing up there? How's lockdown? I mean, do the days matter anymore? Do you even know what today is?
I think today is Thursday. I've been working from home since March 13th, so coming up on a month almost. And it's kind of getting easier. I don't know.
How's Denver as the ghost town?
It's very quiet. It depends on kind of where you are in the metro area. If you drive into the city limits of Denver, you notice that it's a lot quieter, actually. I live on the border of Aurora and Denver, and you can really tell that there's a lot more movement outside of Denver, but Denver itself looks pretty quiet, and you can see that a lot with the aerial photos. John Work in Pueblo had some great ones. And then out here, it kind of seems a little bit more normal, but maybe not as busy on the roads or in the stores, but definitely less, depending on where you are.
Well, that kind of goes into what broke in the middle of the week, and what the governor kind of said was that they're trying to measure social distancing. I saw a stat which they said that they're at 45%. I don't know how you measure that in terms of any sort of quantifiable way other than measuring interstate traffic, or I think Google and some others have their ways of measuring online traffic, and then Netflix has their way of measuring data and traffic that way. So, but from an actual data perspective, what is the state doing and what's being reported out there?
Yeah, actually, I think highway statistics are something that's become really important, and Governor Polis has talked a lot about this. On the I-70 corridor, which is typically pretty busy this time of year, last-minute skiers trying to get up to the slopes. Obviously, they're not anymore, and there was, huge spread up in the high country. Governor Polis said, I think about a week ago, that the traffic reduction along I-70 was 60%, and he said that was good, that was positive, but he'd like to see it into 70, 80%. That would be a lot better, and that's, quite the reduction. Last thing I heard today was that CDOT was going to try to up a lot of its construction along major byways, just because there's a lot less traffic right now. So I think they're going to try to probably power through that. So that's the main thing that I'm hearing traffic-wise. CDPHE and Tri-County Health. Tri-County Health is the health department for Adams, Arapahoe, and Douglas counties. They've been keeping really good track on how well each county is social distancing, and it looks like Denver is, you really can tell in the data that they are staying pretty close to home, not really going out. In Arapahoe, they're doing pretty well as well. In Adams, you see it go up a little bit. They're not doing quite as well as Arapahoe or Denver, but that county also, you're going to see a lot more rural communities. You're going to see a lot more suburban communities than you do in Denver and Arapahoe County. So I think that, even as we look at different areas of the state, you can see that there's a real difference in Southern Colorado and the Denver metro area, but even within the Denver metro area, there's a lot of variance, I think, between communities and how they're dealing with this.
And it's important, because if you take this behind the scenes in terms of the CDPHE map, the Denver metro region, obviously more people, harder to do social distancing, dense populations. And so why it's crucial and what people may not understand. And I think it was put this way because Los Animas County issued this warning about a week ago saying if you visited Denver or any of the regions around there, the counties around there, or El Paso County, self-quarantine in little Los Animas County for 14 days. So what's happening in Denver and El Paso County and the hotspot counties, we are seeing come down and impact rural counties. So what happens in Denver, this is terrible. I apologize to everybody. Doesn't stay in Denver. So I apologize to everybody for that.
Well, yeah. And, you know, I've thought a lot about that too, because, you know, when Colorado was first seeing its first cases, they were all happening in the high country. And when that was happening, a lot of those people were traveling not just to the high country, but these original travelers were coming through DIA. So that's on the edge of the Metroplex, and these people were traveling all the way up to, up to Aspen or Breckenridge or those places. So, you know, that was certainly a big worry, I think, here for a lot of people, just because it's such a busy airport. You know, you probably stop to get lunch or get gas or, you know, something along the way. And I just heard a lot of concern from people about that specifically, that these people were traveling through DIA. But also beyond that, and I was thinking about this with social distancing as well, when Denver first put its stay-at-home order in place, it was so eerily quiet that night. I live in Arapahoe County, and I usually do my shopping in Denver because I just live so close. And it was kind of hard to understand. Like, I live in Arapahoe County, but Denver has this order. So like, should I go out shopping? Should I not? Should I like change my shopping habits so that I only shop in Arapahoe County? And so I think at the beginning, there was a lot of frustration there too, because it was like, just because you live in Denver doesn't mean everything in your life happens in Denver. And same with like, if you live in Arapahoe or Adams, like you travel around the Metroplex a lot. So it was like, I think there was a lot of concern about patchwork orders. And I heard that from Mike Kaufman, the mayor in Aurora, and other folks. They were just worried that like, if we don't have a uniform order, there's just going to be mass confusion because people are traveling around so much. And that's all.
Did they get to, I mean, obviously they've sort of unified with Jared Polis, but order and the extension of his orders, but in Denver, have you seen a change in how they've unified in sort of social distancing, or was it just because Polis came down and said, this is what we're doing?
I think Governor Polis's order kind of cleared things up a bit. I do get the sense that everybody believes that Denver is enforcing this a lot more than maybe the surrounding counties. They've shut down businesses in Denver. I haven't seen that so much out here on the eastern side of the Metroplex. We've had a few, but you know, a lot of people here are reporting businesses that they don't think are complying, or people that they don't think are complying, and there's just not really a uniform way to report this stuff. It seems like you can't just call up the police and say, you know, I see kids on my block. Like, I'm sure people are doing that, but the police, at least in Aurora, have been really clear that this is not our job. We're not going to be enforcing that. This is more of a health department order. Well, this is a health department order, so it's going to be Tri-County enforcing this. So it's kind of like a code violation. That's how they're treating this.
And that's even what Pueblo County Health said. Don't call 911 for it.
Right.
Call the hotline and then snitch on your neighbors. I guess so. I guess it's a snitch on your neighbors situation that is happening now, which is
Yeah.
fine, but it's sort of everybody is, trying to do their part to stop the spread. So,
Oh,
and some
and on
people
that
not
note,
doing their part.
right, and on that note too, the concern that I've heard from police and is that they just don't really have enough PPE yet to really even interact with those kinds of cases. It seems like, I mean, if you were calling the police and they were coming to break up, some like block party or something, like those really aren't happening. But like the police aren't going to respond to them. One, because it's not their job, but two, there's also a lot of concern of if police have the right equipment to interact with people. That's at least been a discussion here in Aurora of if there's enough face masks and shields and that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's kind of a two-pronged, issue.
Something that we heard of today, changing a subject a little bit off of social distancing, was City of Pueblo is going to try some new things to jumpstart the economy. But what I wanted to ask you about was, what are the communities up north doing? Because they've been a little bit in the past more aggressive. Denver has that cultural and scientific fund to help artists out that existed for close a couple decades now. But what are they doing to prepare for when businesses open up economically, and how are they giving businesses money? Is from what I've heard.
Sure, yeah. Nobody, I think, is really quite sure what the rebound situation is going to be like after this is over, because we really don't know when this is going to be over. But I've seen a lot more effort from local governments to offer money to particularly small businesses. In Aurora this week, they announced $1 million would be available for small businesses. And that, for some areas sounds like a lot of money, but in Aurora, there's more than 900 businesses with 50 or fewer employees. So that's going to go fairly quickly. I think Denver has made available more than $10 million to businesses. But the thing I think that's really important for this is that this money is being made available, especially in Aurora, in the meantime, while people wait for state and federal resources to kick in. And I think that the communities up here really see that, like there will be relief from the federal government and the state government, but these people need it now. And I think, that's evident in how many unemployment claims that we've seen across the state. And just, particularly, I think Aurora is an interesting place to look at because there's a huge immigrant population here, and that is important to note because a lot of those immigrants own small businesses. So we really do have a community built on mom and pop shops up here. So that funding being made available now is going to be really important, in addition to state and federal resources.
And I think closer to Pueblo, which it's not really breaking news, but Mayor of Pueblo is looking at changing their long-term half-cent fund to allow some of that money to go to businesses. There's a vote that might have to take place and city council approval, and then the general infighting and squabbling when anything in Pueblo comes up on half cent. But it sounds like at least Denver understands that they have to do something now, and I think behind the scenes, Pueblo's getting there, but it doesn't have a long history of supporting small business other than maybe a chamber or something like that. There's really no economic fund down here.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to, who is investing in the economy. And I think Pueblo for a long time has seen that a lot of I mean, they've focused so much of their efforts on bringing outside money into the community that that's all they really know at this point. And I think there've been so many calls to focus more on small business and the people who live in the community and start their business in the community and send their kids to school in the community. And I, that's going to have to change, I think, in the wake of this pandemic, is that, corporations are probably going to be okay, but restaurants, coffee shops, small businesses, contractors, that sort of thing, they're not afforded the same opportunities as far as, economies go, even if it's the local economy.
Well, let me ask you this, because we've not talked about this previously, but Mayor Gratishar said that they're not expecting things to return to normal this summer. Obviously, the budgets have been blown up, and they don't know where that's going to land. But has Denver or any of the metro communities said anything on what their plan is to reopen or to stagger this, either in early May or mid-May, whenever we can return? Because what I'm hearing is that we're not going back to normal. There's going to be some sort of social distancing. There's going to be some of these businesses may not come back in full because they just don't. They just can't. And then on the flip side, the mayor told me today that they're just trying to do things like learn how to open a golf course, try to provide some entertainment options for people that need to get outside, and how to do that responsibly and safely. So it seems like there are some ways that these communities are trying to reopen in parts, but they still don't know how to get their economy open in full. And they're basically saying there's no way we're going to do this for a while until there's a cure. Is that what you're hearing up in Denver?
I'm not hearing as many conversations about the long term. And I think that that's because there's so much unknown about the near future, especially with all of the models that we've seen. Did we peak this week? Are we peaking in May with cases? Is it going to be June? Nobody really knows. So we've seen, particularly a lot of the counties have publicly shut their doors. And just today, Arapahoe County said indefinitely we're closing our buildings pretty much. Some are, some places are saying, we're going just to match the orders from the state and remain closed till then. But I think it's more of a focus on right now.
And to be fair, that's because, if you go to the CDPHE map, Denver has a much bigger problem than Southern Colorado. So let's just be up front that metro areas are dealing with this in the short term, where that wave or that peak isn't really expected for rural or outside of metro areas until next week or the week after. So just putting that point out there, that
right, yeah.
What you're dealing with now is what they think these other areas might deal with soon. So again, maybe that's why these smaller counties can look forward, because they're not seeing the rates of positives or the fatality rates.
And I think, a lot of the issues that they're focusing on are problems that when you talk to health officials or elected officials, they're like, we needed to have this solved yesterday. We don't have enough tests. We don't have enough PPE. Those are major concerning problems right now. And before you start looking at, reopening the economy, you're going to have to deal with having enough tests and making sure that everybody is, abiding by the social distancing recommendations and that sort of thing, to make sure that, like Governor Polis has been saying for weeks now, like we can't get to that new normal, whatever it will be, until we do the right things now. And that's, I think, just kind of the theme that I hear over and over again.
And that's really what we heard today, because right before we came on, Randy Evans, Public Health Director of Pueblo, said that while they're approaching 50 cases, that's certainly not in Denver where you have hundreds of cases. So Pueblo's a little bit different on the curve. El Paso County is one of the hot counties, but he said that their models expect 10 times the amount of what's reported. So if 50 are reported, they believe there's 500 cases. So in Denver, where some of these counties have 800 or 300 cases, there could be 3,000. And I think that was a stark admission from Randy Evitz that they just don't know. And
Right.
again, it goes back to the point, they don't have enough tests. And I think one of the things where Polis is pitching this, well, we're getting testing ramped up, we've got it ramped up, but it's not ramped up and it's not in the counties yet.
Right.
And it's not, and while they the state can put on that good face, when you talk to health experts, they don't have them. And the only people that are really being tested are the ones that are going into the hospitals or into ICU. Is that what you're seeing up in the Denver metro area?
Yeah, absolutely. And I even, I listen to mostly every day a call, like an update call with the Aurora City Council, and they're constantly bringing up concerns from the community of do these nursing home workers get priority for testing, or they feel like that they are having to go to work in dangerous conditions and there's just not enough testing in case they do contract something. And so you hear it just from different areas of the healthcare sector, I think. But yeah, I think it's statewide trend at this point.
Let me ask you about this thing that came up on Monday, and we kind of did a story on it here in Pueblo, and it was fascinating because there's two different models out there about when things are going to peak. One says Colorado peaked, and then the state model, that was from the University of Washington, and then the state model came up and said, no, we've not peaked, but because social distancing seems to be working, our peak won't happen until midsummer. And then everybody thought, well, what does that mean? If the peak doesn't happen in midsummer and you got to maintain social distancing rates of 60, 80%, I mean, they're realistically, I don't think that anybody can expect to be in their house for 3-4 months, but that set off a lot of talk, both on journalists. I know most of the outlets did a story on when something peaking. So to put it back in a context, what does Denver think when you talk to your sources about when the peak happened? Because it does look like the curve is, they flattened the curve, but the peak isn't here yet. So what are you hearing?
I think at this point, I don't think I've talked to anybody who believes it's already happened. And I think this week has been, compared to the others, has felt really long, because at the beginning of the week, we started thinking look at this model. It says that we've hit it. We're there. It's, it was so optimistic. And then all of the, state health officials started speaking out and saying, not so fast. But I think that, I think it's irresponsible to put so much weight on one model. And very early on, Governor Polis was saying that he was relying on several models, and he thought that, an average of models was probably the most reliable source of information. And it seems like he's pretty much stuck by that. Nobody is really saying that we've reached it. As far as when, I don't know. I'm hearing
They're not giving you any of that.
There's just not a lot. I think there's just not a lot of talk about it at this point that I've heard from my sources. But the one thing that they all agree on, I think, is that it hasn't happened yet. And it's discouraging every day when Governor Polis says it's going to get worse before it gets better. But that's pretty much what everybody's saying still, is that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
To, I guess, close out, what are you looking ahead to? What's going to happen over the next 2 weeks up in Denver? What's coming up on the radar for everybody up there?
I think just seeing what happens case-wise or hospitalization or death-wise in the next, 2 weeks, we're going to see either the state stay-at-home order run out or extended. I don't think at this point that it will be cut short. There's just no indications of that happening. Denver Mayor Hancock said, nobody around him was saying things were going to let up until at least April 30th. The state order, is up at April 26th, I think. And so I think it's just really going to rely on what happens in the hospitals the next couple of weeks.
I think down here, they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I don't know if I don't want to say anybody's lucky, but they are waiting for the outbreak. And I think that they don't know if social distancing happened early enough to slow this down, or that there's an outbreak waiting to happen, but they can't track it. So they're just hoping that the numbers stay low. There's some optimism because, as we've seen 2 weeks ago or a week ago, every day there'd be more counties in El Paso, or more cases in El Paso County, Denver, Arapahoe, Adams, Douglas, and around that. But we haven't seen that in Southern Colorado. There's only 1 or 2 cases. Chaffee County, which is Salida and Monarch Mountain, another resort town, has not jumped up recently, so they've stabilized. So there is some optimism there, but I think that everybody's waiting for the shoe to drop, and if it does, they hope they're ready for it. But
yeah, I mean, one of the things that I heard on a Aurora City Council call last week was that the state was hoping to add 5,000 beds by the ICU beds by the summer. And that was information that they said that they had gotten from the state. And that is an incredible number of beds to add by the summertime. So I think that alone indicates that, like Polis has said, this is not getting better anytime soon. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
And I think that's the one thing that I don't know if the media is doing a great job of conveying it, because every day that we report that there's a stay-at-home order or we report the numbers. But if you talk to people behind the scenes, well, they don't expect the same type of shutdown or stay-at-home order to last an entire year. They're more in line with what that this is going to have some impacts, and they're trying to figure it out into the next couple of months, and that we're not going back to normal. It's not like they're going to. It's not like Prohibition, where on May 1 we're all going to start drinking again.
Right. Yeah.
This is. I've not heard one source tell me on May 1. Everybody can go out and party and it's going to be great. It's going to be, we're going to figure out how to manage this, but probably social gatherings and things like that will be impacted well into May, maybe into June, and who knows beyond that. Which brings up an interesting question, and we'll talk about this maybe next week, is if you can't open everything up, what do you do in Denver? Red Rocks, concerts. How do you impact the cultural economy, or how does that impact the cultural economy? Because if we don't go back to normal, that's a big part of Denver's and Denver Metro's area's regional economy, is just the sort of tourism and culture.
Right. Yeah.
And this brings up something when I talked to Fremont County Commissioner and the mayor over there, that they're optimistic because outdoor recreation might be the thing where you can reopen first instead of indoor concerts or things like that. So outdoors we might see those places open up and have an added advantage. So maybe Red Rocks opens, maybe the Royal Gorge opens, but something like the Fillmore and indoor events like the State Fair are impacted this summer.
Could be. I haven't heard of anything super far out being impacted. Though I will say in Aurora, we have the Gaylord Rockies Convention Center, and those will attract conventions, with thousands of people. And they've pretty much canceled everything. One source told the Sentinel that they had laid off 800 people, and they hoped to rehire them at some point. They wouldn't confirm that number to us, by the way. They wouldn't give us a number. But it does seem like there have been many layoffs there. And so it's, it's not just like what we think of traditional tourism, like you drive to Denver to see a concert or you go to the Denver Arts Museum or that sort of thing. But there's, tons of people coming here just for like conventions and that sort of thing. And I think that that's going to be a huge impact as well. Because, you come to Denver for a conference and then you want to go to Red Rocks and then you want to do all of this other stuff and you just can't now. You can't even come for a conference. So
I don't know. I think it's so early that nobody knows what's going to happen in August because everybody's just trying to figure out what's going to happen next week. So
right. Yeah, absolutely.
We won't know. Any stories, any headlines for next week that you're working on?
I'm really curious to see if and when the ventilators get here. We're expecting, I think, 100. And then just how those are utilized in Colorado. I think the thing to watch from here on out is what happens in the hospitals. Because at this point, if you're not going to get a test and you're being told to just stay home and isolate if you're seeing the symptoms, then who knows how many actual cases we have. I think the real telling, stories will come from the hospitals.
Yeah, those are the same things we're hearing here and that New York and Italy were the ones that kind of said, look at the hospitals, the positives may be not an accurate number because of our limited testing supplies.
Right. Yeah.
But look at the surge of hospitals. And on that note, Pueblo County Health, when I asked them this week, what are they seeing? They basically said that as of right now, they are not seeing this huge surge of people going in the hospitals. So from Southern Colorado, it looks optimistic. But again, our peak is supposed to happen either next week or the week after. So or who knows when it is. Kara, appreciate it. We'll check in next week and see where we're at. So appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thank you.